Okay. All right. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn a little bit about this really great topic. I'm Jennifer Della Quadri. I am a certified life coach. I work with teen girls and moms on all the things, whether it be body image, confidence, communication with one another. It basically runs the gamut. I am also the mother of two teen girls. One is 13, or one just turned 14, and one is almost 16. So I am also the mom of teen girls. I'm a certified life coach and former teacher of 14 years. So that's a little bit about me. But what really makes me qualified to speak on this topic, overcoming perfectionism, is I myself am a recovering perfectionist. And I didn't know this. So, probably a couple of years ago, somebody pointed it out to me that that might be something that I have. Do you think you're a perfectionist? And at the time, I said, no, absolutely not. And the reason why is because I always thought of perfectionism as being somebody who always had everything tidy, orderly, everything super organized. And that certainly is not me. And so, the more I got to know this person, the more I started to notice the tendencies and the behaviors. For me, really, it showed up in having unrealistic expectations for myself and never really feeling like everything I did was enough. Also, not delegating, I would take on everything for myself and always in an effort to please others. And also, really, there was a lot of comparison and leaving me always feeling like I didn't measure up. And so, as a result, I took on too much. I ended up suffering with anxiety and overwhelm and stress and just basically low self esteem because I really had that thought that I really wasn't living up to my potential. Once I realized that that was the issue, that it was perfectionism, and I started to address it and shift my thoughts and behaviors around it, my anxiety really basically went away around the whole thing, and I just got more realistic and I started enjoying my life a lot more. So that's why I'm here to talk with you about it, because it shows up a lot in women specifically because of the unrealistic expectations that can be perceived out there on social media, in the news, in the movies, all the things. So today what I'm going to do is first share with you what perfectionism is. We'll talk a little bit about signs of perfectionism so you can see what is it really truly that makes someone a perfectionist, and then why it can be a problem, how it can show up in your life as a problem. Then finally, I'll talk to you a little bit about three different ways, steps and techniques to help you manage this perfectionist tendency of yours, or someone in your life, if you know someone in your life. Finally, we'll close out with some Q&A. So first, what is perfectionism? The definition of perfectionism, I have it here on my paper, is the need to be or appear to be perfect, or even believe that it's even possible to achieve perfectionism. So that is what perfectionism is, needing to be perfect, but also thinking that perfect is even an achievable goal. So people who are perfectionists typically believe that nothing they do is worthwhile unless it's done perfectly. And instead of really being proud of progress that they've made or achievements that they've made, it's constantly comparing, downplaying, and really not unless it's flawless output, really. And so that's not to be confused with high achievers. High achievers do experience being proud of their accomplishments and other people's accomplishments, and they are not afraid to fail. That's the biggest difference. Being supportive of others and not being afraid to fail. Whereas perfectionists are really driven by fear, whether it be fear of judgment, fear of making a mistake, fear of looking funny. It all comes from a place of fear. And we'll get a little bit more into that when we talk about the problems that can arise in perfectionism. So here are 6 signs of perfectionism. And listen to these and just notice if any of these signs have shown up in your life or shown up for you. So the first one is being highly critical. So whether it be critical of yourself or others, there's this very high standard of the way things need to be in order to be acceptable or good. So a perfectionist won't will see a task as not being finished unless it's perfect. So they won't even start it oftentimes. And a lot of the times, perfectionists will downplay wins. And so by this, I mean, here's an example. One of my clients that I was talking to, she was talking about how much she just loves to dance. And I said, "Are you a good dancer?" And she said, "Oh, I'm okay. I'm not bad at it." And then I challenged her on it and I said, "Really, are you good at it?" And she was uncomfortable saying that she was good at it. And this is a tendency to happen when people who have this high standard or expectation for themselves don't want other people to say, "Oh, no, you're not as good as you said you were," right? And it comes back to that fear of judgment. So a perfectionist is always highly critical of themselves or others. And another way that this can show up, this showed up in my life, is not letting other people do tasks in fear that they won't be able to do it up to your standard. So a perfectionist might take on way too many tasks because they don't think another person can do it at their level and at their standard. And of course, if that is what happens, then it won't be a perfect outcome or a perfect accomplishment. So one is highly critical. A second sign of perfectionism is having unrealistic standards. So, having standards of an outcome that causes someone to either quit early because it's not going the way they see that they need it to go in order to be at that high standard, or not trying at all. So it comes down to really all or nothing thinking. And that happens a lot. Either it's going to be perfect or it's not going to be happening at all. I'm not going to try it unless it's going to be perfect. And this can happen a lot after the fact, too. Seeing something as a failure because it wasn't perfect. That's definitely something that comes up in a perfectionist mindset. So, a third thing is perfectionists are often focused on the result versus a process of something. So, instead of enjoying the steps that it takes to get to a goal, it's only goal related. There's no success unless it's done. So not being able to perform a task at all unless it is perfect. Or if I'm not going to be perfect, I'm not going to play at all. Also, viewing the end product as just being the most important and only thing. The next one is a fear of failure. And this is really all encompassing with perfectionism. If I can control the outcome and be perfect, I'm not a failure. And it's what it makes it mean about you as a person. So, difficulty making decisions. This is something that comes up a lot with perfectionists. I don't know whether I want to wear the blue shirt or the red shirt because I don't want to make a mistake. So, I don't want to make a decision because if I make a decision, it could be a mistake and therefore be a failure. Also, it can come up with not trying new things. I'm not going to try it if I don't know how to do it because I might fail. Also, avoiding challenges. If it's going to be hard, I don't want to try it because I might not be as good as I want to be. And there's two more. The next one is procrastination. And this is one that people may not see as being a perfectionist tendency. It can be seen as maybe being just unmotivated or avoiding doing the work. And really, that procrastination comes from not wanting to begin the task unless they know they can finish it to completion and have it be at a high standard or perfect. So they'll put it off. If I don't start it, then I don't have to risk failing it. And so a lot of the times, perfectionists will put it off so that they're doing things at the very last minute, having to rush through it. And also, another thing with procrastination is taking an excessive amount of time to do something that doesn't take others as long to do. And that all comes back to the thought and the checking and the making sure it's perfect along the way. so that it will be just so at the end. So, a lot of times in school projects, if we're talking about teenagers, other teens may be able to finish it in a day or two. A perfectionist team will take an extended amount of time or spend a lot more time in that time period to get it done. And the last one, the last sign of perfectionism is low self esteem. So, when a perfectionist is constantly comparing and never feeling like they measure up, it leads to lower confidence, low self esteem. I don't want to put myself out there because I don't measure up. And we'll talk a little bit more how to address that because that is definitely fixable. And also, never feeling like they live up to the expectations of themselves. Perfectionists have very high standards for themselves and never feeling like they actually will get to that level that they think is achievable and what is supposed to be for them. And also feelings of unworthiness. I'm not worthy of my accomplishments, right? Like I am not, that this should not be coming to me because I didn't earn it or I'm not good enough. It all comes from that thought. I'm not good enough. If it's perfect, I will be good enough, right? So those are the 6 signs. Now, moving on to the causes. And again, the causes could really be very diverse. I'm just going to talk about a couple of them that are really prevalent. One is really a fear of disapproval from others. And whether that be self imposed or from an experience in life. So maybe someone has been brought up with a parent who is highly critical or also sees or expects perfectionism in all areas. So a perfectionist may have been brought up to believe that perfectionism, having a perfect outcome, is really the only outcome that's possible. And anytime they failed, a parent or a teacher may have been disapproving of them or made them feel less than. And as a result, they feel like they need to be perfect all of the time so that they don't feel that judgment again. Also, it comes from feelings of insecurity. So when you feel insecure, you don't want to put yourself out there and make a mistake because it will feed back into that insecurity and that whole belief that I'm not good enough. And also, it comes to inadequacy. I don't measure up. Another cause is potentially having a parent who is a perfectionist. So, learning by example. The parent holds themselves at this high ideal, therefore, the child, whether it be a teen or an adult, also takes that ideal on as their own. And it also can be used as a shield of protection. So, if I'm perfect, I avoid that feeling of being judged. I avoid that feeling of failing or being blamed for making a mistake. So if I am perfect, I don't have to have those uncomfortable feelings. That could be a cause of perfectionism. And the reason why perfectionism, and I talked about high achievers and perfectionism. High achievers, like I said, are okay with failing. They're okay with putting themselves out there and sitting in the discomfort. A perfectionist will never feel like they're good enough. And because they feel like they're never good enough, it leads to feelings of stress, anxiety. It can lead to depression and other mental health concerns. And really, it keeps a person from living up to their potential because they're so afraid to take a risk. So that's where it really becomes a problem. They're afraid to challenge themselves. They're afraid to step outside of the box. And they're just sitting in their little perfect, everything needs to be perfect box and not taking a risk and really letting themselves experience the full gamut of life. So the good news is that it is not something that's permanent. Someone who has perfectionist tendencies can overcome it. So I'm going to share with you 3 ways that can really help you or your teen overcome and really address this tendency. The first one is huge. It's to notice your self-talk. A lot of perfectionists will talk down on themselves. Oh, it's not good enough. I'm not good enough. It's not going to be good enough. I might fail. And when you notice that self talk, that's where it all starts. You are what you think. Your feelings come from what you think. All that negative self judgment comes from thoughts in your head. And that's really where the shift starts to happen. Noticing the negative self talk, intentionally shifting it to more positive talk on oneself or lifting yourself up. So, learning how to shift that. And I'll get into that a little bit in a moment when I share an experience that I had with one of my clients. So, starting affirmations is one. Another thing that you can do to shift perfectionistic tendencies is to learn new ways to think about goals. So instead of having this high standard of it's this or it's nothing, breaking the goal down into small achievable parts. So that way you're still experiencing the success of it, but you're not overwhelmed by this giant massive goal that may or may not be achieved. Then also breaking up the tasks within the goal into small, achievable steps so it's not so overwhelming. Focusing on one activity or task at a time. And then acknowledging that everybody makes mistakes. In fact, eventually acknowledging that making mistakes is part of the process, it's an essential part of the process. Failing is the way you get to your succeeding point. It's the way you grow, and it's the way you become an even more achieved person, if that's even a thing to say, when you are able to achieve your goals as a result of your mistakes, of your failures. And then really confronting your fears of failure by being realistic about the possible outcomes. Not it's being perfect or nothing. It could be really great. There could be mistakes. It could end up this way, and it's okay. So, really, just thinking about your goals in a new and different way. And the third one, which is so incredibly powerful, is shifting your behaviors. So, like I said, shifting the thought is one thing, but shifting your behaviors and really giving yourself the opportunity to sit in the discomfort of not being perfect makes being perfect less of a goal for you. Because once you notice that you're holding yourself back and you experience that opportunity to be less than perfect and realize, oh, wait a second, I'm not going to die if it's not perfect. Wow, I'm actually alive. It was uncomfortable, but I'm still okay. And the more you do that, the more you allow less than perfect to be a standard, the less overwhelming it would be to fail. So challenge yourself to do the thing anyway, even if you don't know how good you're going to be. Try doing something that you is new to you and be okay with it being less than perfect. Enjoy the process of it. So, here's the story that I wanted to share with you. I had a client who started working with me because she was having some perfectionistic tendencies, and it was showing up for her in her on the soccer field. She's a really good soccer player, and she was noticing that she wasn't putting herself out there. She wasn't getting aggressive on the field because she was afraid of making a mistake, looking silly, and letting her team down. So she would hold herself back. And when we got to that underlying thought of, I don't want to fail, I don't want to let my team down, what if I make a mistake? We then started working in our sessions on shifting that thought to something that's more powerful and more empowering. And for her, it was, I know what I'm doing. I've done this before. So that even if she was playing a new position on the field that she'd never done before, she was able to look at it. There are parts of that that she knows and that she can do without thinking. I know what I'm doing. And instead of getting in her head, what if I make a mistake? I know what I'm doing and then going for it and getting more aggressive on the soccer field and really allowing herself to step into how really talented she was as a player. So really it all came down to shifting the thought and then her behavior of actually starting to become aggressive on the field. And what was really great about it is she came back to one of our sessions and she said that there was a moment in a game where she did make a mistake and kicked the ball in an awkward direction. And she was like, it wasn't a big deal. It happens all of the time. But when a perfectionist sees themselves do that, they see it as a huge deal. When they see someone else do it, it's like, oh yeah, that happens. It's not a big deal. It's not make or break. So shifting the behavior to be more in line with it's okay to step out of the comfort zone and sitting in that discomfort. So the more you fail, the less you fear failing because you realize it's not as big of a deal. So before I do a quick recap and go over everything, it's really important to point out that failing is part of success. And there are two people who are incredibly successful that I'm going to mention, and you may know this already. But I always like to point out that even the most successful people in the world have had huge failures. One of which is Walt Disney. His editor, before he became Walt Disney, said that he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. And then he created Disney. That was a big failure. He didn't let it stop him. And thank goodness. And the other person is Oprah Winfrey, one of my favorite people. She was fired from her first TV job in Baltimore. And then she became who she is. And she has this amazing quote that I think is so great for perfectionists and for anyone to really remember. And that is there's no such thing as failure. Failure is just life trying to move us in another direction. So to sit with that and know failure isn't the end. It may be the beginning of something new. It may be a way of you achieving this greatness that you had not possibly been able to achieve had you not failed. So just to recap, I'm going to record this too. So if you're wanting the recording, I'll have it on my YouTube channel. Just to recap, 3 ways to manage perfectionism. One is to really get clear on your self-talk and shift the way you talk about yourself. Number 2 is to learn new ways to think about your goals. Look at your goals differently, set your goals differently. And number 3 is to really start shifting the behaviors that are leading you to hold back. Really get used to stepping into that discomfort and getting comfortable being uncomfortable. The more you do that, the less perfectionism will hold you back. So I hope this was helpful. And always reach out to me if you find that perfectionism is holding you back. It's just a simple mindset shift. I help my clients with all of the time. And I'm going to stop the recording and thank you for attending. And I really appreciate you being here.